Well, I'm glad you're all here this morning. And this is the Unsatisfied series. Hopefully not the unsatisfying series. But we're talking about that in 2017 in a brand new year. What I was thinking when we started this whole thing is that we all have the same number of hours. We all have 8,760 hours to spend this year. And yes, we've done the math. We've already spent 515 up to this moment now. So we're at about 8,200 left, or about 6% is gone already, and it went by so quick. But the thing about these hours that we have this year, about the same amount of time, none of us get more, none of us get less. We can't gift it to someone. We can't buy more. We can't pause through the boring things or the painful things and fast forward through them. We just have to go live streaming through our lives this year. And most of the things we do are not going to be satisfying. Most of the things we do are things that we talked about a few weeks ago, are appetites. And the thing about appetites are, whether it's food or sex or money or pleasure, in the words of the country song, I ain't never had too much fun, like all of those things we will experience this year. But they'll never satisfy us by design, because appetites are never fully fulfilled, and they can't be. Like, imagine if you just had a meal and you go, we say this all the time, I never am going to eat again. I said that 3 times this week, but I didn't mean it. Or, hey, I never want to be around people again. I've said that before, but I didn't mean it either. So all of these things, they're not satisfying. And so let me just give you the same guarantee I gave you every week this month. Outside of heaven, you will be unsatisfied. You'll never be completely and fully satisfied, but that doesn't mean that we can't, as Christians, live a more satisfying life. I think Jesus was really clear about that. This is not something that's even sort of out there, or sort of, hey, you've got to check 3 translations. Jesus was very clear that as followers, as his children, we could live more satisfying lives. And so this week we're going to kind of zoom in on an area that I believe will either be your most satisfying part of this year or your least satisfying, and maybe both at the same time. So I think we can do better on this idea of relationships with parents, with children, with your boss, with your friends, with your people here at Action Church, with the people that you're on Facebook with, the people that you deal with in your life, the relationships we have with them. Are either going to be some of the sources at the end of this year. We're either going to look back and go, that was the most satisfying part of my year, or in many cases we're going to go, that's sort of the least satisfying thing I deal with, is just my relationships with others. It never turns out the way I hope. And so we're going to talk about sort of the problem with people. And I know there is a problem with people, because you've probably said the same thing I have even this week, anybody say that this week? What is wrong with people? I'm going to tell you what I think is wrong with people, but you probably have an opinion. Here's what I think is wrong with people, and this is across the board. This is family members. I feel like I'm doing the airing of grievances here or something. This is not Festivus. But what is generally wrong with people is I find that they don't do what I want them to do. That's what's wrong with people. They just don't. And here's the whole problem with that. We go through life sort of trying to get other people to do what we want them to do, right? You would, if we were just having a conversation, and I was better at conversation, but if I could ask you the question, your most unsatisfying experiences in relationships would end up being, I want my kids to fill in the blank, but they won't. Or, you know what I really wish my husband would do, but he won't. I can't get him to. He says he will, and then he forgets. Or what I really want my boss to do. I want my boss to, but he doesn't. And I wish my father would say this. And so we go through life struggling with this situation that we have, where we're not satisfied with our relationships, and the truth is, it's because we're not getting what we want. In fact, I steal this from Andy Stanley. I think he's a brilliant guy. And he said that we should stop every argument, and this would work, but I would never do it. Like in the middle of every argument, all we would have to say is, the reason why I'm angry at you is because I'm not getting what I want. If everyone said that, it would sort of solve every argument, but we won't do it because we don't like admitting that. But that's the truth. The truth is that the reason why we're going to be unsatisfied this year, and the reason why we've been unsatisfied in the past, whether it's in our marriage or our family or our work relationships or even at church. You might be here at Action Church because you're like, I'm unsatisfied. I tried to go to another church and they wouldn't do what I want to. And I would say to you, you're welcome, but I guarantee you we won't do what you want to. We don't even do what I want to do. We're good at not doing what people want to do. So here's the thing I want to talk to you about. So let's start out from Scripture. I think Josiah said last week, so you've got this figured out? I was like, no, I do not. But I've been doing some studying and doing some reading, and I think the place that we should start is something that Jesus' little brother James said. And I just think that in itself is amazing. Every time I talk about James, the fact that Jesus had a little brother who didn't follow him during his life, like he basically, from what we know, the only time we see Jesus' family during his life here on earth was them going, why don't you come back home, Jesus? You're sort of embarrassing us. Like, why don't you knock off this whole Son of God thing and come home? So they were not believers, except for Mary. But later, after Jesus came back from the grave, I guess this would work for you. Jesus comes back from the grave, and James actually becomes a follower. In fact, he starts his letter with James, a servant of Jesus Christ or a slave of Jesus Christ. So James actually becomes a committed follower. I've lost connection here. Shocking. So if somebody could bring me a phone or something, that'd be great so I can read this next verse. So we're going to start out, and right now I'll flip around with James, and I'm just going to turn around and read it because I don't have it up here yet. And he said these words, and I will guarantee you this one thing about it. Like, you're not going to like this because I don't like it. What James said is, what is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from, thank you, don't they come from the evil desires that war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. And you're jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and you wage war to take away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask God for it. And even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want only what gives you pleasure. And as I told you, you're not going to like that because I don't like that. I mean, I read that and I was like, James, I have never killed anyone. I don't know what you're talking about. Isn't that always our first defense? I've never murdered anyone. I've never broken that commandment. I've threatened it many, many times, but I've never killed. And I don't like what James said immediately because he's basically saying it's our fault. Like, it's my fault. Like, the reason why I'm not getting what I want is because, number one, I don't want the right things, and the fact that I don't get what I want causes me to lash out. And he actually takes it sort of to the end degree. He's like, you go to war with others, to which I would say to James, and probably what you're thinking right now where you're sitting is, yeah, but James, don't I have needs? Don't I have rights? We have rights, right? We have, and then we would say these words to James, at least I would. Don't I deserve fill in the blank, whatever it is we're not getting from that relationship that we want, whether it's our kid or our dad or our mom or our wife or our husband or our boss or the neighbor. But what James would say, and the reason why this stings a little is because he's right. He's like, all conflict happens, whether it's between nation states or neighbors, because someone doesn't get what they want. and they go to war, maybe not literal war, maybe not pick up arms against your husband, wife, neighbor, father, son, maybe not, but we go to war to get what we want. We start that argument, we lash out, we send that email, we press send on that thing we know, we send that text, that passive-aggressive text. We go to war to get what we want, to let people know I'm not getting what I want. And what James says is pretty shocking. He says, you don't have what you want. Now, he's writing this to Christians. If you're not a Christian, not a follower of Jesus, this is good information, and you could sort of understand why Christians are weird and sort of the idea of what Christianity is, but this is not for you. You don't have to do this. But what he's saying is, if you're a follower of God, if you're a Christian this morning, he's saying the reason why you don't have what you want is not because what other people aren't giving it to you. It's not because your father isn't doing what he should. It's not just because your wife isn't giving you what you need. It's because you're not asking God. And then he goes on to say, and this is slightly more frustrating, I think, he said, you don't ask God for it, and even when you ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want only what will give you pleasure. And I'm like, I know, that's why I'm asking. And that's why I don't ask God very often, because I know he's not going to give it to. See, that's this. I told you you're not going to like this, and I don't like this, but would you not agree this morning that even though this is not exactly fun to read, or like, oh, thanks for sharing that, Don, or glad I want to read more of James, it's true, at least, right? Like that the reason why we're frustrated in life, and the reason why we sort of go to war with each other, and the reason why conflict happens is because we're not getting what we want. And we lash out because of it. And he even says, and you're jealous of what others have, and you can't get it. Isn't that also true? Like when others get what we want and we don't have it, then we want it from them. We're like, you shouldn't have it. I should. I deserve. Now, that is difficult to sort of square, I will tell you, with what Jesus said, because we've been talking all month about, hey, Jesus wants you to have a more satisfying life. Like, Jesus said to the woman at the well, we talked about this last week, anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again, but those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again, and it becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. Like, what is more satisfying than that? Never being thirsty. He said in his Bread of Life sermon, if I'm the bread of life and you'll never be hungry, and he didn't mean we wouldn't need to like order out food because he just fed 5,000 people. He knew we'd physically be hungry. But he's talking about this idea that something about Christ, something about being a follower of Christ would be so satisfying that you'd never want again. In fact, he comes out and says it in John 10:10. He said the thief, he's talking about Satan, the thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. And then he just says these words. He says, my purpose is to give them a rich and satisfying life, or life more abundantly. So Jesus is very clear that somehow following him, that somehow following his principles, somehow the right way of living would be more satisfying, not less satisfying. That we could have more abundant life. But James is saying that we're not going to get what we want from others. And in fact, that's the source of our problem. So it leaves us at this sort of conflict where I don't know about you, but it bothers me because I go, wait a minute. So I'm supposed to be satisfied with never getting what I want. That's what I read between the two, that James is saying, the brother of Jesus saying, hey, here's what I know from Jesus, and here's what I know from the Spirit of God within me, that your problem is you want stuff you're not getting. Stop wanting it. Like, that's your problem. Ask God. Don't expect others to give you what you want. So how are we going to have more satisfying life that Jesus promised if we just sort of never get what we want in relationships? That's a human problem. It reminds me, I got rear-ended this week. There's a point to this. And as far as the unsatisfying series goes, I will tell you that I got the most unsatisfying apology I think I've ever got for it. I was at a stoplight. I'm at a stoplight, and there was a big truck with like some sort of big bridge beam on the back of it, and he was making that curve, and he had to do the back up, go forward thing. And so the light turns red, and then the light turns green again, and the light turns red, and I'm like on my third cycle, and I'm not exactly enjoying it. And then it gets worse because the light turns green again, and then bam, I just get slammed in the rear. I'm in my work van, so I can't even see out the back. I don't even see anything in the mirrors. But it was hard enough that like all my clipboard and everything on my cab divider like flies forward and hits the dash. And I'm just like, wow, I knew I'd been hit. And I got out and I went back there and I see this poor lady, like she's out of her car. She had like a little Toyota and she's picking up pieces of her headlights. And thankfully my truck was fine. It was great. Nothing like a metal bumper versus Toyota Corolla. It was great. But anyway, it didn't hurt me. But she said these words to me. She looked up at me and I was like, I got to remember this for this sermon. She said, I'm sorry, but the light turned green and you didn't go. And I was like, oh, yeah, there was sort of a giant truck in front. She goes, I know, stupid truck. And I was like, but see, that feels like, excuse me, doesn't that sort of feel like what we're talking about here? Like, if we do what Jesus says and what James says and sort of yield to others, like I'm yielding to the truck, sort of because I'm a nice guy, more because I really didn't think I could push him out of the way. I thought about it. He was so slow. But here's the thing, like we yield and then we're just going to get rear-ended by somebody else, right? And like everybody loses in the end. Because she was right. She was right in the fact that she had the right to go. The light was green, but I was in her way. And I thought, man, that is such a picture of the problem that we have. Like we have this problem, like, if we yield for someone else, if we're the person that does what Jesus says, and think about what Jesus said about relationships that make relationships more difficult. Like he said, turn the other cheek. When someone slaps you, I'm like, put up a good block and return with the right cross and probably a kick to the side. That's just me. But he's like, no, you turn the other cheek and give them another shot. And you're like, that's not going to work, Jesus. He said, if people take your shirt, give them your coat also. And as much as it sounds fun, we always say, hey, we're a business that goes the second mile, or we go the second mile. Do you know where that came from? It came from Jesus saying, hey, if a soldier forces you, imagine you're a Jewish citizen walking down the road, and a soldier says, hey, you need to carry my pack for a mile. That's the law. I can stop anyone I want. Imagine how frustrating that had to be. Here, these occupying Roman soldiers could take any citizen and go, hey, you have to carry my pack for a mile. And it didn't even matter if you're going that direction. You could be about ready to get home, and they're like, hey, you got to carry my pack for a mile. That's the law. And Jesus said, if someone asks you to carry your pack for a mile, go the second mile. And it's funny, isn't it? You've probably heard that expression. That came from Jesus. Beautiful saying, really frustrating in a relationship to go, I'm going to constantly sort of be the person being rear-ended here. If I yield, if I give in, if I sort of just always go the second mile and turn the other cheek and give more than is expected, it feels like, at least, that I'm always going to be the one getting rear-ended, and everybody loses. And so I just want to read to you, admitting that I feel like that, and you probably do as well, and it is difficult to deal with. Here's what Jesus said about relationships in his most sort of powerful sermon about relationships. And he starts this we're not going to read the whole chapter, we don't have time, but this John chapter 15, talking about vine and branches. He's like, hey, here's the way things work. I'm part of God, and I'm like a vine, and you're the branches, and you are connected to me, and I'm connected to God, and through this, we're all together. We're one thing, and it's a beautiful picture of relationship. But he gets to this point that I want to read to you this morning because I think it gives us some really practical ideas of how to do this. He said in John 15, 9 through 13, he says, I have loved you even as the Father has loved me, remain in my love. And when you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with joy. Yes, your joy will overflow. This is my commandment, love each other in the same way I have loved you. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Now, that is exceedingly beautiful and even more sort of poignant because he says this in his last days or day even before he goes to the cross. Before he gives up his life. I mean, this was not a figure of speech for Jesus. This is literally looking forward, knowing that he was going to give up his life for his friends. And if you're a follower of Christ this morning, if you're a Christian, for us. But I want you to notice, and it's pretty interesting to think that when he's saying this, he's tying it in. He's like, I'm telling you not how to get through life successfully, not how to make people do what you want. He's saying, if you live like this is my plan for ultimate joy. Ultimate sort of fulfillment is to live life this way. In fact, he goes on to say, like, you'll be filled with joy. In fact, your joy will overflow, like more than you can handle joy. If you do what? He said, this is my commandment. And once again, remember, like, this is his commandment as he's like getting ready to leave this earth. Love each other. And that, I think we could like live with that part of it. Like, what does love mean? I mean, like we could probably deal with that, except he said very specifically how we're supposed to love. He says, love each other in the same way I have loved you. And that's a pretty tough thing to do. It's a pretty tough thing to do if you think about it, because Jesus had ultimate power, and all he did his entire life is leverage his power for others. Like, never once do we find Jesus setting up this big organization, setting up the national headquarters, getting his name on the sign, getting his name on the letterhead. None of these things that Jesus did at all benefited Jesus. And he's saying that's the way you should love others. Like, and then he goes on, if you're going, well, Don, I'm not sure if he meant that. He says it. He says, there's no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends. Like, literally, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do what I do. I want you to love other people like I love them. And in fact, if you're unclear what I'm talking about, like, the greatest love you could ever have is to completely sacrifice everything you have, sacrifice your entire life for others. Which kind of puts us back in the same place we were before, because we're like, wait a minute, so if I'm a follower of Christ, if I am going to do what Jesus said, and I'm not saying any of us can truly love our friends and our family and our neighbors and our boss in the way Jesus loved others, but if the model is supposed to be that I am going to love them like Jesus did, and I'm going to give up everything I have for them, I'm going to leverage everything in me for them, take nothing in return like Jesus did, that means I'm not going to get what I want. I mean, that means that, like, somehow Jesus is trying to tell me that I'm going to find the most joy I can have in this life and not getting what I want. And that doesn't compute, does it? I mean, I'm like, talk about getting rear-ended. That's what this sounds like to me. Like, all I'm going to be is the guy going, after you, after you, after you. At best, I'm always the last one to leave the four-way stop. At worst, like the other day, I yield for someone else. I'm going to get rear-ended. Like, it's going to cost me something every time. And so I'll be honest with you, I don't just get up here and talk to you. And like, nobody writes my sermons and I don't get them out of books. It'd be so much better if I did. But like, this is stuff I actually think. So I am thinking about this week, going, how I believe you, Jesus, and I know this to be true, but how can I explain this? Like, how can I prove this in a sense? Like, and that was sort of the moment I'm thinking about this. I'm writing this sermon, and it's interesting because I was writing this sermon like in a hotel room down by the airport. Now, I don't travel a lot, and it wasn't, everybody's like, Michelle finally wised up. He kicked you out. You had to go live in the hotel. No, threatened, but never happened yet. Like, I'm staying. Yeah. But anyway, like, I was actually, and I don't see how, like, I don't like traveling on business, and some of you guys do it all the time, and God bless you. You guys are road warriors. You impress me. Like, I just hate it. But I had a thing that I needed to get a house ready for market, so I needed to paint a house, and it was kind of too far away to drive efficiently, and so a client needed me to do it, so I went and I stayed in Pottsville, PA. What a great destination for a couple nights and painted this house. And so as I'm writing this sermon, like I'm on my laptop in that weird chaise lounge that only shows up in hotel rooms, like no one else has that. I don't know, there must be like a hotel catalog you get it from. But anyway, I'm in this lounge, like writing this, and it sort of struck me like, wow, as far as this idea goes of getting what you want, you, Don, are probably getting what you want right now more than ever as part of a family. Now I want you to understand, this is not about like, oh, you should have a family like me, or hey, my family's great. It's not. It's like we're not perfect, or hey, boy, I'd be more satisfied if I was married. I'm just giving you my perspective as like an old married white man. I'm in this hotel room writing this sermon, and it struck me like, as far as getting what I want, this is probably the most it's ever going to happen. Like, I have the remote and nobody's telling me what to watch. And it's funny, like I have a TV with 1,000 channels, I end up watching Netflix. And why? Because I got to watch Netflix that I don't get to watch at home. Like, I've been working for like 17 years, it seems like, to get through this one series. And I'm like, I'm watching that now. And so I could watch what I want. I told my daughter, I work out with my daughter every night, and I told her, hey, I don't know that I'm going to go. I probably won't go to the gym. I don't even know if they have a gym, but I'll do push-ups and set-ups. I did none of that. Like, I don't even think I set up out of bed. Like, I was like, I'm not even bending my abs all week. So it was like, I did what it's like I didn't do that. And this wasn't the reason why I chose this place. I chose it because it was cheap on Expedia, but it had a Cracker Barrel I could see from the room. I'm just saying, like, I ate Cracker Barrel every meal, and I'm not even making that up. Like, that's all I had. I would probably die if I lived like that. But it was like, and like I went to work when I wanted. I got off when I wanted. Like, nobody telling me what to do. Nobody saying, hey, can you fix this? Nobody going, hey, can you carry this? Or, hey, well, I hate to tell you, but this is, like, none of the things that would probably keep me from doing what I want to at home, just like you wouldn't get to do what you want to at home. In fact, I will tell you, I think the best definition of a family that works is like a place where no one gets to do what they want, right? Like, where the kids don't get exactly what they want, and mom certainly doesn't. She's doing things she doesn't want, and dad's not doing exactly what he wants. In fact, when a family breaks down, it's when one person does exactly what they want, and it just breaks down. But as I was writing this, and as I was thinking, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't experience this because I've been married for almost 27 years next month. Like 27 years, I don't travel a lot for business anymore. Like, I'm always home. Like, it just struck me like this is what sort of being able to do whatever you want would look like for me. I would choose a better hotel room. Well, I'm just saying. But other than that, like the Cracker Barrel in the parking lot, that was perfect. Like, I would build a house right there. I'm just saying. But like, I'm just thinking like, this is it. This is for you, Don. This is like, you can do whatever you want. And how come you're not jumping up and down on the bed like Kevin in Home Alone 2? Like, this feels more like prison. Like, I miss my family so much. I was like, oh, I just can't wait to get home. This is so... And it struck me that getting everything I want is probably the least satisfying way of living. And in fact, some of you, you may not have a family, but I will tell you this morning, I believe that if you just think about it, like the situations and the relationships where you put more of yourself in and you get less of what you want, maybe, they're the most satisfying. And I was just thinking, I was like, my goodness, many of us would say this morning that like getting everything we want out of a relationship, honestly, got us to a place we didn't want to be. I mean, you look back on your relationships and you go, hey, I took and took and took and I got everything I wanted, and now, I'm in a place I don't even want to be. And but it still leaves us with the problem, doesn't it? I thought, you know what? I don't know if everybody's going to feel that way, and I know that everybody doesn't. We have single people, we have married people, we have people who used to be married, we have people who never want to get married, people with kids, without kids. But I just believe that I think all of us, if we just take sort of an inventory, I think you would find that sort of the more you put into a relationship and the less you take out, the more valuable it is. Now, here's the problem with that. Because when I say that, and when you say that to yourself, like maybe Jesus is right. As in that hotel room, I'll tell you what I was thinking. Jesus, you are so right. Like, I'm so glad I don't get to do what I want to do all the time. I would be so empty and miserable and probably dead from eating too much fried Cracker Barrel, but it'd still be awesome for a little while. But the problem is like how to start that. Because we feel like, yeah, but if I just start turning the other cheek like Jesus says, or going the extra mile, or I start going, hey, I'm not going to demand my way anymore. Like, okay, I need to stop demanding my way. I need to stop getting what I want, stop trying to make people do what I want. It just feels like, oh my goodness, I'm just going to be the guy getting rear-ended. It's going to suck. But here's the thing I realized. That is true if you're sort of the only person that's not getting what you want. And that's the way we imagine it. Like, well, nobody else is going to do that. Like, if I stop for this truck, somebody's just going to hit me in the rear. That's the way it works. But I want to remind you of this, and it struck me like what a genius plan Jesus had. Because you know what? When everyone yields, no one ever gets rear-ended. I mean, imagine it like if we're at that stop, if we're at that sort of intersection of life and we just sort of go, hey, after you, after you, after you. I know the light's green, but go ahead. I see you're having trouble getting around. Like, no one ever gets hurt. No one ever. And that's the picture of what Jesus designed our relationships to look like in Christ. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to happen. And trust me, folks, that doesn't mean my family's like that all the time. But I will tell you, oh my goodness, I know that I might go, hey, there's some things I do that I don't want to do, or things that I want to do I don't get to do. But oh my goodness, they give so much more. And I'm so much more satisfied being in a family and you will find the same. And so I just want the band to come back up, Matt and the company to come back up. But see, the goal, as much as we like to go, oh, well, Jesus, if I do what you say, you might be right, but I can't do it in my workplace because I'm just going to get run over. I can't do that in my marriage because she'll win. I can't do that with my kids. They might think they're getting one over. No, that's not what Jesus said. Jesus said, you do this, you start. But man, you know what? What if we lived a life, and there's nothing more beautiful in a family, in a church, in a friendly relationship, in a business, when everybody just sort of says, oh, after you go first. I know I might deserve that. My light might be green, but that is the picture that Jesus had for relationships. And guys, there might be ways that you could be happier short term. There might be ways that you could be more profitable. There might be ways that you could get more of what you want and, leverage sort of your power and make people do what you want. But I will guarantee you there is nothing more satisfying than a family or a friendship or a business relationship that lives this out. So I'd like to pray with you. And I'd like to pray with you for the courage to start sort of that process of loving someone enough to yield first. And I also want to pray for the people around you, because I know it's not easy when you go, I'm just going to get run over. I know. But somebody has to start. So I want to pray for you and for me this morning. Dear Jesus, God, we are blessed. We are blessed that your commandment for us was to love each other. But as wonderful as that is, and as nice as that sounds, God, we're just admitting right now that that's really hard. And it's really difficult to start. And it really makes us feel vulnerable, and it makes us feel like, oh, we're going to get run over if we do it. So God, I pray for everyone here this morning. If they're a follower of you this morning, God, I pray that they would start this somewhere. God, I pray that they would bring this into their relationship at home and in the marketplace with their friends. And God, for everyone here who is not your follower this morning, who's still wondering, or maybe who doesn't even believe it, God, I pray that, and this all comes from you. I know that this whole thing started because you showed your love toward us while we were just yet rebellious sinners. And so, God, I just pray that they would feel that love this morning. And God, I pray for everyone here today that took the time to come out on a Sunday morning, that they would have more satisfying relationships. And God, I pray that it would start as we learn to yield and love others as you love us. In your name we pray, amen.